me between you so I can pick up.
Oh.
voice of the microphone. We're here today with two distinguished individuals, one of whom I believe many of you know. Let me start by introducing the individual who you don't know. On my right, your left, is Brimley, who is the Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Workforce Investment, which oversees the Office of Employment Training, the Office of Career and Technical Education, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and the Office for the Blind. Very pleased to have Ms. Brimley with us today and to hear the information that she and Dr. Beach, who many of you know, who is a graduate of ours and also the Executive Director of the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And they are going to be talking about the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board's strategic plan and probably some things related to that. So glad to have them today, and I will turn it over to Ms. Brimley and Dr. Beach.
Thank you, Dr. Crystal.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and we are going to be talking about the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board strategic plan, and sometimes I can move into workforce speak. So if I'm talking and using terms you're not familiar with, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask me to clarify something. And also, if you have a question along the way, don't hesitate to raise those questions. Did give you one takeaway, which is kind of an overview piece of the Work Smart Kentucky plan. And in it lays out kind of the background, the vision, the goals, and those initiatives that we have launched already out of that strategic plan. And so just to give you a sense of that. And I am a member of the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board in my position as commissioner. Let's see here. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why the plan is so important, how it relates to the work that you all do every day, and what it means as far as preparing folks for the workforce. And as you can look at the data about states and their performance in key areas that are important in education and economic development, one of the areas that we're making some progress on, especially I think through the work of Dr. Beach and a number of other folks together, is in workforce quality. And workforce is the #1 issue now when you're talking to economic developers about why and where they locate and who they hire. And so it's an important part of our discussion. When we talk about the vision that the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board put into place, it's a vision that really focuses on taking the best practices that are going on across the nation in regard to workforce investment and bringing them here to Kentucky so that we can create a rich economic environment and that we can provide the quality of life for our citizens that we so desire. To give you some idea of why we felt the need to go through a plan and reorganize and restructure, this is all of the workforce programs across the Commonwealth. This board was presented to the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board when it was reconstituted in May of 2009. And the members of the board said, if this is the way things are structured, we need to blow it up and start all over again. So with that, I think we came up with a pretty solid approach to how we organize the workforce resources, and it's on the back of your handout. There are inputs, and that's everything from human capital to funding streams to all of our partner agencies to the physical operations we have across the state and data to the value-added processes that we offer, career development, workforce readiness, employer and employer services, and supportive services. And then finally, what our outputs are. We're qualified workers, that we're supporting business and industry that want to stay and grow in Kentucky, and those that want to be attracted, and that we really take a good hard look at what we're doing and that we have a commitment to continuous improvement. So that's how we are moving and working in the Commonwealth today. I think some of the major themes that are in the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board are really structured on a couple of things. One, that we're demand driven, that we really help the individuals that we serve in employment and training programs, whether it's through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office for the Blind, or the Office of Employment and Training and Career and Technical Education, is that we're preparing them for opportunities that are available within the Commonwealth and within the regions in which they live. The other is that it's business-led. Business knows what they need and want in the workforce, and we need to listen very carefully to them, and that we need to retool. Instead of, here are our 20,000 government programs and we're here to help you, it's about talking to the business person about what's important to them. What human resources needs do they have? What retention issues do they have? What recruitment issues do they have? And how can we help them be successful in addressing those particular issues? And doing that from a solutions-based approach, which is to say, here's what we can bring together with all of the offices that Dr. Crystal touched on that are under our purview, as well as our partner agencies. Here's how we can provide the Kentucky solution to what that business and industry needs, as opposed to the employment and training solution and the KCTCS solution or the university solution or the economic development solution. We come together with that business and we provide what's called the Kentucky solution. There are 4 overarching goals to the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board strategic plan. One is to align to the education goals of the state. We have some significant goals to move folks along the education pipeline. The next is to align to our economic development goals. The economic development goals have been updated through a strategic plan that the Economic Development Cabinet put out, and a great deal of what their work is really aligned to where the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board was already moving, which is to say we value sectors, and those sectors are critical employment areas where we can find high quality jobs and promising wages to pay for a family sustaining wage for those folks who move into those areas. A better customer service. Our focus is that we aren't here to maintain the bureaucracy. We're here to serve our customers. And so when someone walks in the door, instead of them having to know the right program to ask for or be determined eligible for just one program, what we want to do is take a strategic approach to that individual. We'll qualify them for everything that they're eligible for and provide a comprehensive portfolio of services. And one of our lead agencies may be the lead case manager on that, but we'll bring the resources around that person. They don't have to know them and ask for them. We will take a broad view of them and say, here are the things that we can bring from all the different assets that are available through the Commonwealth. So it's a little different. And the other thing is to make the system simple, to make sure that our customers know who we are, where we are, how they can access us, and what they find in a one-stop in Louisville, Kentucky is what they're going to find in Lexington, Kentucky, is what they're going to find in Pikeville, Kentucky. From a foundational standard, there might be some unique community needs that we'll be responsive to, but we're going to make sure that we have a name that people know and recognize. And that name will be our name for all of our services and all of our online approaches to what we're doing. With the strategic plan and those 4 goals, there are 25 strategic action items that are in place to support meeting those 4 goals. And what I'm going to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about some of those strategic action items. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. I'll probably touch on 7 or 8 as opposed to all 25. And but if you're interested in something that I haven't talked about yet, please feel free to raise a question or ask me about it. There are 5 areas of the strategic planning process that we have goals and action items for. The first is around systems transformation, and these are probably probably the most significant initiatives that we have undertaken. And I have to laugh because when we first developed the strategic action plan, we were envisioning maybe rolling out 5 of these at a time. But we got Recovery Act money, and we knew what the budget future was in the Commonwealth, and so we decided to launch quite a few as opposed to just 5 a year like we originally planned. So I think in the first year, David, what did we launch? 18 strategic action items within the first year, so that's pretty significant, but we have moved along with some of that. The first and one of the foundational pieces is to talk about sector strategies. And sector strategies is all about what I was talking about earlier. What are the natural resources? What are the talents and resources that are available in the community, and what businesses are located, what concentrations of businesses, and how can we develop that foundational piece so that we are providing long-term for those businesses to stay and grow, as well as opportunities to attract new businesses into the Commonwealth based on the resources that are available statewide, as well as regional targeted sectors. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later. The next is branding and identity, and what we were talking about there was the need to have a name for the system, and it be a name that's recognized all across the state and not necessarily associated with a particular program or agenda, but that is something that would be helpful. The third was to create user-friendly online services, that you don't have to be an expert in our various programs to be able to navigate and find the resources that you need to be successful. The next is National Career Readiness Certificates, and that is an opportunity for individuals to show the skills that they have in various critical areas that are key to any job across the country. And that also gives the folks who may have lost a job an opportunity to demonstrate those skills and kind of be fresh in front of an employer. Eligible training provider list is basically saying those folks who are approved to provide training across the Commonwealth, that they are tied to these sectors and other priorities of ours in the Commonwealth, and also that they have good outcomes for the people who participated. So sector strategies. What we're saying is, as resources are shrinking at the federal level, at the state level, and the local level, we really cannot afford to just be willy-nilly about the training resources. And what we want to do is work with our customers to help them make informed choices about the labor market area and what opportunities are available, and to provide training opportunities in those critical sectors, whether they're state level sectors or whether they're regional targeted sectors within regional economies across the Commonwealth. And it's an opportunity to leverage resources. What we have done is we've put some industry partnership grants out where we bring the industry sector businesses together. They talk to us about what their comprehensive human resource needs are. What are their 5-year, 10-year, 20-year projections? What are the critical career pathways that an individual may need to move into in order to be able to be successful within this company, within this industry sector, within this part of the state? And so then we want to create the talent pipeline, both with the emerging workforce, those who are coming out of high school and associate degrees, universities and the like, and also that we are able to help the incumbent workforce, those folks who are already in the workforce, get the skills so that they can keep their employment opportunities in the long term. I'll give you a great example of that. We have churn going on, for example, in the coal industry. It's probably some of the greatest layoffs, but it's also some of the greatest hires. And for those who are in the coal industry who were used to doing manual labor, they're losing those opportunities. Now they're hiring people who operate very sophisticated technology, and you don't even have to do the physical labor. You're managing a piece of equipment which is doing the work. And so you have churn going on in a lot of industries today because individuals who did manual labor are now doing very sophisticated IT, technological types of efforts. But anyway, what we're talking about here through these industry partnerships are that the business community says these are our needs. now and within the 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? And how do we, as the workforce professionals, as the education community and the economic development community, need to come around and rally to support those individuals? And then it's a partnership of state and local efforts as well. Branding and identity. We hired an international branding firm to move forward with this effort. And the company that we hired was Landor, and if any of you have seen KFC and their promotional items and that sort of thing, that's the group that we hired. And part of the reason why was there were over 90 brands for workforce development efforts, whether it's the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office for the Blind, the local workforce investment boards, which you could go to Eastern Kentucky and it's known as EKSEP Job Link, and if you go up to Louisville, Kentucky, it's called Kentuckiana Works, and if you're an individual who's moved from one community to the next, you wouldn't necessarily know how to access those services. If you're a business who has workforce needs, you wouldn't necessarily know, so we want to simplify the system for our customers. We went through a very strategic process where we talked to our individual customers about what it is that we do. We actually had our consultants go into One Stops and take a look at the workflow and what was happening there. We had them do surveys of individual and business customers off of our website who were using our website to say what makes sense. We got down to a few names. We put those names out to our customer base, the businesses and the individuals. It didn't matter whether I liked the name or David liked the name or anyone else liked the name, but it mattered if our customers did, right? Because we want them to connect with who and what we are and what we do. And so our customers selected Kentucky Career Centers. And so that is the brand for the Department of Workforce Investment, all the offices, all the programs, all the services available. And so Kentucky Career Center, we're going through the internal launch phase right now where we're educating all of our employees, all of our contractors, all of our staff about what our brand is, what our brand promise is, and our brand promise is really anchored in being customer-centered and helping regions grow and to create success stories for those individuals who are served through all of the programs that we offer, through the Office for the Blind, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office of Employment and Training, and the Office of Career and Technical Education. So with that, it was a real recognition. These were just some of the logos that were there, and it's really confusing. And it's something that we can work with our partners, whether it's KCTCS or the University of Kentucky or adult education in the Commonwealth. We can partner and brand co-brand the work that we're doing. We've also gone through a process of one-stop certification where we set those foundational standards for what someone could expect if they're an individual customer who walks through the door, whether they're a business customer who walks through the door, and how we manage the one-stop operation itself as a group of agencies and entities together. What's happened over time, though the Workforce Investment Act speaks very broadly, if you will, we have several titles in it. One is around the Workforce Investment Act, and then there's our component, then there's Wagner-Pizer, then there's vocational rehabilitation, there's adult education in there, and each of those are components of the Workforce Investment Act. And the spirit of the law was that all of these entities would be working collaboratively to serve customers. And what has evolved over time, it's more like a co-location, and there are programs and services that are located in the same place, but they weren't necessarily taking a holistic approach to serving that individual customer. Someone might walk through the door and they'd be eligible for services through the Office for the Blind, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, through the Veterans Program perhaps, or through our migrant seasonal farm worker, but they would come in and they would talk to that one specific program person, and that's the services they would get, not knowing that there were a whole host of other services that they were eligible for, entitled to, and could have access to make sure that they got the full complement of what they're eligible for. So that is part of the reason behind our one-stop certification standards. We wanted to change the expectations, and we wanted to have some consistency across the Commonwealth so that when somebody walked in, there were certain things that looked and felt the same, just like if you walked into a McDonald's or a Walmart or somewhere else. So, but we also want to recognize and provide for that regional adaptation. So we have gone through a process where we develop the standards. We have a self-assessment tool that all of the partners are working to complete for every single one-stop. And then they have been applying for technical assistance money to help them get from where the self-assessment says they are to where we want them to be. And then we're going to start the certification process for one-stops in October of 2012, and that'll run through September 30th of 2013, that one-stops will be certified. And if they're not certified, then they won't be a part of our new brand, Kentucky Career Centers. So. With user-friendly online services, after we did the branding, there were 3 core elements of the services that we provide: career, training, and employer. Pretty simple hallmark words. So we are organizing our online presence to fall within those categories: career, training, and employer services. And we are working with a consulting firm right now to help us set up kind of like the web framework. And then once we have that standard, then we're going to be rolling it out across all of the department website pages. And we'll also be working with our community partners, local workforce investment boards, and making resources available to them to align their web presence so that it looks and feels like a cohesive system as opposed to a bunch of programs that we're operating. Any questions about the system transformation initiatives that we have underway?
I have a question about the WIA. A year and a half ago, I got laid off from my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a letter when I file for unemployment. I got a letter from the WIA saying that Obama developed this program to where you could go back to school if you were a displaced worker.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into the WIA. The very first thing they said was, well, funds. We can't do anything for you. And I said, okay. So I went in and probably early February.
Uh-huh.
And I think they said the fiscal year for them was like in October.
Yeah.
And I was like, how in the world can you run out of funds in 3 months? You know, and then they said, we can't help you until the next October.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what good's the program?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, you know, forgive me for being a cynic.
No, that's okay.
But you know, my whole thing is it didn't help me at all.
Yeah.
And they had the gall to send me a letter
Right.
and said that we've got services to offer you.
Yeah.
And so they raised our hopes up, my wife and I thought, okay, I
Sure.
can go back to school.
Sure.
Well, here I am.
Yeah.
But
And here's the
I'm
tough
getting
part
paid for
about
it
that.
right.
One of the elements of the Workforce Investment Act talks about that there's a local control part of it. So let's say Kentucky gets $35 million. Off the top, it said, the law says 5% for state administration, 10% for discretionary, and then we have to use a funding formula that funds across the Commonwealth how much each local workforce investment board gets. And that's based on the number of individuals who are dislocated, the education attainment level, and other things. So money is distributed by a formula. So you may be in Lexington, Kentucky, and they have already committed because they enrolled people already the fall semester, and they've already you went in February, they've already enrolled everybody for the spring semester. So they had those resources committed at that particular point in time. So unfortunately, but you might go to Eastern Kentucky and they may not have used all of their resources at this point. There are some flexibilities in the law that allow local workforce investment areas to shift money. There are 3 categories of Workforce Investment Act funding under WIA: adult, dislocated worker, and youth. The federal law gives some flexibility to move money between adult and dislocated worker. resources, and some local workforce investment areas do that. Others don't necessarily do that. We also reserve a pool of money to help when there are distressed areas. Let's say a plant closes down, they weren't expecting to close down, they've already used all their dislocated worker money. They can apply for some additional resources for the state for those unique, or we can go to the federal government for a national emergency grant. And we have, I think, 10 national emergency grants right now to deal with from disaster areas. When we had the tornadoes that came through, we got a national emergency grant to serve people who lost their jobs as a result of that. We got a national emergency grant for community when a community has a certain amount of layoffs. But part of the problem is that we're paying tuition, and so what happens is someone is enrolled in September, they get the bill in October, they pay that, then they have those folks that they've committed to their training plan. So where you came into the equation impacts you, and also whether or not your local workforce investment area has committed all those funds. Some of them commit them in the year that they get them. You have the ability to spend that money a couple years over time. Some local workforce investment areas hold a little bit of that money so that they have for when a unique situation comes in or someone comes in after the last semester to do it. So it's a little difficult to be consistent across the state in regard to the answer for your specific situation, but that's how it works. And so sometimes it will be the case. In other years, that may not be the case in your local workforce investment area. I mean, this has been a significantly stressed time for the system overall. The demand far outstrips the resources that have been made available, and but they also wanted to make sure that people were aware that there was the opportunity if the resources were there to do it. And that's part of the problem. You know, that letter came from the Unemployment Insurance Agency, and they don't know themselves whether or not that local workforce investment area that you're associated with has the resources or hasn't committed all the resources. So it's frustrating. I certainly respect that. So anything else? Any other questions right now? Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people have social workers if they're youth going on 18 and going just into the workforce, and some people have social workers because the nature of their lives. And how do they work with the counselors to get people jobs? Where do they come? Where is their role in this?
There are a couple. The way the youth money in the Workforce Investment Act flows is through contracts. They contract in Louisville, for example, they contract with Jefferson County Public School System to provide the youth supports and work with counselors and so forth. In other areas, they may contract with Goodwill or the NAACP or other entities to provide that youth support. And I'll talk a little later about our high school outreach initiative. Well, actually, we're coming up, the educational alignment. So let me walk through that. That's actually one. Tech High talks about the whole idea of helping people look into career and career opportunities. iBest is one of our initiatives that focuses on individuals who don't have their GED. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of the term Accelerating Opportunity Kentucky, but we are in partnership with Adult Education and Kentucky Community and Technical College System to integrate adult education skills with industry certifications and the National Career Readiness Certificate. So an individual can enroll in a sector program in one of the 8 colleges across the state that are in the initial pilot with us, and they can get their high school diploma, an industry certificate, and a National Career Readiness Certificate at the same time. So if they dropped out of school, it's their opportunity to plug back in and not say you have to do this all sequentially. First you have to get your GED, then you can get your industry certificate, then you can get this. It's saying let's put it all together, because a lot of us, as we know, learn better when it's in context to something that's important to us. So if I want to be a nurse, and I'm able to take my GED to develop my basic skills while at the same time I'm studying health terms and terminology, health, math, everything is related to the career I'm interested in, I'm more likely to be successful, right? Because it's something I have an objective to move forward with in my career than if I was just going through GED, which isn't in context to my career interests, and getting that industry certificate at the same time. So it's called Accelerating Opportunity Kentucky, and we're in 8 colleges across the state right now, in at least 2 sector areas that are critical to that regional marketplace. And then we're going to roll out to the other 8 community and technical colleges over the next 3 years. So apprenticeship, that's the opportunity to learn hands-on, kind of earn and learn environment. And so we want to promote that as an option. Lots of times, especially for individuals who are dislocated workers, they want an opportunity to earn and learn. They can't afford to check out and be in school, and go full time. They need something where they have that opportunity, and so we want to promote that. High school outreach, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and then GED Express, which is an opportunity to maybe do a concentrated. We take you, put you in maybe a state park, and for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's a crash course, and then you get your GED, and then you can go on from there. And that's important in Kentucky because we have over 400,000 working age population who don't have a high school diploma. And we know, both from national studies and other studies, that the tipping point is a high school diploma and at least 1 year, including an industry certificate, to have a family sustaining wage. And we really need to help folks understand that, grasp that, and move forward. So. High school outreach is an initiative that is one where we are trying to marshal the resources that are available through a one-stop career center system, whether it's the transition services of OVR and OFB, or whether it's the career guidance information and labor market information that the Office of Employment and Training through our labor exchange system and others have available for young people to make informed choices and to develop a pathway to so that they can find the resources, the financial resources, whether they can get the supportive services, childcare, transportation, other issues that they're dealing with, to be successful and to transition from that secondary experience to the post-secondary experience. Anything you want to add there, David?
Mm-mm.
Okay. No. So our effort is to try to get those resources not only available through the Kentucky Career Center system, the one-stop centers, but to actually take them to high schools so that we don't lose, so we lose so many people in the transition phase, whether it's 8th grade to 9th grade or from 12th grade to college to the secondary. And so they'll work with case managers, they'll work with social workers, they'll work with others to help develop a individual education plan or individual employment plan based on their preference to move forward. Any questions around the education alignment area? If not, economic development arena is really exciting, and we have really been working very hard over the last few years to strengthen our partnership with economic development, and they've been doing the same with us. One key area is entrepreneurship. We have a lot of people who've lost jobs over the last 4 years through the tough economic times that we're in, but they have great skill sets, and they could own their own business. They have the opportunity, if provided supports, to be successful in entrepreneurial areas. And so part of our effort is to say we want to cultivate that. We not only want to cultivate that in the incumbent workforce, but we want to cultivate that in the emerging workforce. When the Gallup poll, the president of Gallup spoke to the National Governors Association, they said that they talked to 5th graders and 12th graders, and they said that over 50% of them said that they wanted to create something or invent something, and the other 50% said they wanted to own their own business. Well, if that's what they want to do, then we have to be thinking a bit differently about education and vocational supports and trainings to make that happen. Work-ready communities. This is a really exciting initiative. It's something that's been developed jointly with the Economic Development Cabinet and with Adult Education and some of our other partners. And it sets out 6 areas of attainment for communities. And by community, we're talking at this point, you have to be certified as a county, and all the counties in your region have to be certified before a region could be designated as a work-ready region. But it talks about high school graduation rates, post-secondary education attainment rates, national career readiness certificate holders. It talks about information literacy through broadband exposure. It talks about, I'm going to forget all of them. Let's see. Anyway, there are 6 different components to this, and we set thresholds based on where each county was in the state in these 6 indicator areas. And we wanted it to be something that you had to work towards, and you could be a work-ready community, or you can be a work-ready community in progress. You make application for those statuses, and once you receive that status, you can use that as a hallmark. It's been the most well-received economic development, workforce development joint initiative in over a decade.
So can you talk a little bit more about what that means for, like, I know Woodford County was one where I live. So what does that mean for a county? Why would they do that in terms of, I mean, you said a hallmark. Can you go a little bit more into what that means?
What that is that really gives something to a business that's interested in locating within that community to say, we have the skill sets to meet your long-term employment needs, that we have the talent pipeline. We have high school graduates at a certain level. We have a number of folks who have post-secondary degrees. We have folks who've obtained national career readiness certificate statuses. We have folks that are have skill sets that you could come, you could locate your business, or if you want to expand your business, grow and thrive, this is the place to do it in. And so that's kind of the message that, and having that designation will mean something to employers who are interested, because as that first screenshot I showed you, workforce is the #1 thing that the economic development in the business community is looking at when they're trying to determine site selection on where they're going to put their business. And it's also the thing that's going to determine whether someone stays and grows their company here. You know, we have gazelle companies, you know, and so it's important. And it's also important, you know, when you as parents are making decisions about where you're going to live, a lot of the reasons are because you look at what the success rate of that education system is at the K-12 level, at the post-secondary level, and make those decisions. You make those informed decisions because you want the best for your children. It's the same with the business community. They want to make investments where they know it's most promising. And so that's why it's important to us. Business services redesign is another key area, and it's one I'm going to talk a little bit about further here in a minute when I flip slides. And then Economic Development Academy, to get the economic development and the workforce development professionals both understanding what they're doing, what their priorities are, how they can complement each other, how important it is confidentiality and building trust and working relationships together, so that, for example, the economic development folks may say to David, we have a company, what was it, Converges, who wants to hire, they want to do a business where they have folks work from home. What a perfect opportunity to take a look at the folks who are going through our vocational rehabilitation programs, saying, is there a match for these individuals to be successful? And so what we want to do now is take a look at that employer's needs from a holistic approach, and that we're supporting each other. Business service redesign, I think I've already touched on the term solutions-based business services. And what we want to do is have a team of business service professionals. That'll be including the folks from the Office of Employment and Training, from the local Workforce Investment Board, from the local economic development agencies, from the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, the Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office for the Blind. And what they may do is they may organize by the sectors that are critical to that local workforce investment area, and they become knowledgeable about those sectors and what the human resources needs are of those companies. And then they go in and they have a conversation with that company and they ask 5 questions. Basically, what are your recruiting needs? What are your retention issues? What are your human resources needs and other elements, and take that information, come back, and the team develops a solutions-based response that doesn't say this program, that program, and this program, but it says we're prepared to help you address these issues. And here is how we can go about that. And do you like this proposal? And then all of those agencies are working together. David may have folks who are on his roles who are qualified to fill long-term positions. We may pull some folks from the Office for the Blind through the Office of Employment and Training and others to be able to harness the resources to be able to respond. Instead of going to that business person and saying, we have a good social service opportunity for you. We have an individual who we want you to create a job for. And then we have to market that from that perspective. Instead of saying, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, we hear what your needs are, and we've got the right candidate for you. Different message. Business only hires from a social service, feel-good community service obligation. Only 3% of the companies do. So if we're successful in getting in the door through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they can't meet all the employer's hiring needs, we can bring all the other resources of the agencies together. And vice versa. If the local Workforce Investment Board has the relationship with that company, and we know what the need is, and we know that there are great people that are moving through the Office for the Blind, the Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office of Career Tech Ed, and the Office of Employment and Training who could help meet those needs, then we work together and we provide that Kentucky solution to that employer. They don't have to know 20 different people. They just have to know one person that they can pick up the phone for and know that they're going to get everything that they're eligible and entitled to receive. And our focus too is to try to help those companies not only when they're, laying people off. We want to help those companies and those individuals through the business life cycle so that we can help them grow their workforce long term and they can expand. Or if they need to contract, how we can work with other companies maybe to hire those individuals so there's no gap in service, or career opportunity and those sorts of things. So that's a big key to our business services redesign. Where we are in that process right now, we're finalizing our new business services framework. We're doing training for all of our business services employees across all of the agencies so that there's some consistency of knowledge and understanding of approach. But then there'll be some regional adaptations through those local workforce investment areas on what specializations and what sectors, for example, or what approach they take to reaching out to business and industry. But we think if we take this consolidated approach to building those relationships, that we'll have more market penetration, and we'll have better success with our employers, which means that we have better opportunities for the individual customers who come through our doors. So, any questions about that? Then that leads us to simplification of the system. And even with all the things that we've been talking about, I'm sure some of you are going, what? That means what? Adult funding, dislocated worker funding, OVR funding, how does this all work together? So one of our key messages is that we want to get rid of alphabet soup, that you have to know our lingo and our culture and our program acronyms in order to be successful. And I know I've used acronyms in this session as we're talking today, but we want in our print materials, and in our relationships and conversations with folks that we don't move into our vernacular, that we keep it simple and straightforward so that our individual and our employer customers can understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. Partner for Success is a major undertaking, and part of it, I talked a little bit about how we have the co-location of services, and when we said to our employees, we did a couple of surveys. One was, tell us what would be key for you to be successful in partnering, and the first thing was we have to understand what each other has to offer, and what are the intersection points, and how can we complement each other, and how can we work together. So we organized 3 institutes across the state where we trained trainers to then go back and train within the department and all of our partner agencies and one-stops about a couple of things. What each of the partners do, and making sure they understand, how they serve them, what services are available, how they complement what's already being provided. We also provided training around the major initiatives of the strategic plan. A lot of the planning effort to this point had, until probably this year, had been a lot of foundational things going on at the state level, but there really wasn't a lot going on in the field. So folks needed to understand and help be a part of that change. We want them to be part of the change process with us. And then the third element was we had adopted one-stop certification standards in that individual, employer, and managing our business sectors. And we wanted to get to some of the fundamental elements. Like one of the topics that's caused a lot of consternation, we've had a lot of healthy discussion around, is functional supervision. So if we organize the center not around programs, but around services, for example, assessment or employer services and other things, so that when someone comes in, they don't have to know all the names of the programs, they can get to the services they need. Then what are some of the elements of that? We may put teams together, an assessment team that has somebody from the Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office for the Blind, from the local WIB staff, and from the Office of Employment and Training. And together they would make up a unit that focused on, let's assess these individuals and make sure we have all the data we need to have a really good plan to serve that individual. And so there might be someone from the Office of Employment and Training who's overseeing staff from all these other different programs. And so that functional supervision is a little bit different than the model we've been operating under thus far, where you just work with your program and that was all you did. So, and it also, as the budget has been difficult with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office for the Blind, we have had to close categories, we've had to move into order of selection, and we're telling other folks, just like you got the letter from unemployment saying you're eligible for WIA services, we want to make sure that we take the expertise that you're gaining through this vocational rehabilitation education that you have, and we're sharing that with individuals who don't necessarily have that background but are serving people with disabilities, because we don't have all the resources to serve all the categories of individuals with disabilities. And so we want the Kentucky Career Centers to be a place where an individual with disabilities has good access, that things are organized in a way, that we have technology that can provide supports, and that we tap into the expertise that you all have to make sure we're well-rounded in serving that individual, though they can't be served through your funding stream. So that type of communication is what we're hoping for. We're developing departmental policies so that we can break down some of the barriers between programs. Right now, the first ones that we're working on are confidentiality. And it was interesting, we were surveying all the offices. Some of the offices had consumer confidentiality policies, and some of them had staff confidentiality, but none of them had all of those. So we're going to develop 2 departmental policies so that individuals can share that data. They don't have to tell their story 20 times to 20 different case managers of 20 programs they're eligible for. We can take that information, we can share it among each other, we can triage what services can best be provided for which programs, and the customer doesn't have to worry about any of that. And so that's what Partner for Success is all about. Statewide reserve investments are, we have received discretionary money from the federal government to do innovative things at the state level. It's what's paid for a lot of this. But over the last few years, given the financial hardship and the demand on the service delivery system, Congress has taken those monies and put them directly into the federal formula for local operations. So, in fact, Kentucky and other states are applying for waivers from some of the state level requirements that the federal government has given us because because those resources are no longer available to us. I was talking about that 15% money, that was 100% of the state money. We still keep that 5%, but we've lost 70% of that money at the state level for innovation and transformation types of initiatives, and that's gone into the local funding, strategies. So that's an important part of it. Case management talks about how do we restructure if we have an integrated case management system so that all of the folks who are serving that individual have access to all the information about them to the level that they need, so that we can maintain confidentiality on whatever disabilities are there to the level that they need to be protected for the individual customer, but that there's enough information to share so that we can make informed service delivery choices and supports. And then finally, high impact WIBs. One of our efforts is that there's a policy arm at that local level, that local workforce investment board. And all of our agencies serve on those local boards. But we want there to be collaboration in the community, just like there is at the state level, from education, economic development, and workforce development, and that we're leveraging resources and that we're being smart with what we're doing and how we do it. So we want consistent case management across the state. We want comprehensive knowledge levels of our staff so that one of the things that I talked to David about is how through vocational rehabilitation there's been a real commitment to the education and the professional development of their staff. And that's something that we want for all of our system. And so the Workforce Development Academy is a way that we're going about starting that process, where we're going to have a department-wide education and training and support system. And so our first foray with that, we're going to train the trainers this summer in June, and then we're rolling out over the next year from July 1 through June 30th, training almost 2,000 people on why is there a need to change the way that we're doing business right now. And it has to do with global competition and being responsive. Then what is our vision, which is all the materials we've been talking you through. And then the next piece is how do we make sure we really are customer-centric, meeting the needs of the business and individual customers who are walking through our doors or who need our help. And then finally, the fourth component is how can you be an innovator in the process? How can you breathe life into these 25 action steps through your day-to-day work? And so that's our first foundational piece, and then we'll be building more certifications and so forth, but we wanted to get that good foundation for what our workforce system is going to be in the 21st century around that. Let's see. Customer service, well, I talked Workforce Academy, didn't even preempted myself. Our outreach initiative is actually that whole rolling out of the branding and identity effort that we have underway. Get Back to Work is a place where we may overhaul our unemployment insurance laws in the state of Kentucky that say that if you don't have a high school diploma and you're on unemployment insurance, you need to be getting a high school diploma and you need to be pursuing post-secondary education and training and making that a requirement as opposed to an option as a term for receiving your unemployment insurance benefits. One-stop kiosks, we've been playing with a way to be able to do some creation of workflow within the office so that we can expedite folks getting in. A lot of the offices have been overwhelmed with the number of individuals who are coming in for their unemployment insurance check or have had a problem with their processing of their unemployment insurance claim, or they're doing their eligibility review where they're looking for work and documenting that. And so we've done a lot of things to try to modernize that process and take the pressure off of transactional activities in one-stops and be able to focus on high quality, high touch efforts. So if you can get your check direct deposited, then we don't have issues with lost checks or issues around that. If you can do your eligibility review online, you don't have to drive in and have somebody just check off a form. You know, we can also take a look. We have a new system called Focus Career, Focus Talent, where we do a skills development resume as opposed to a keyword search resume. And it takes a look at tens of millions of people who've been successful in getting jobs. And it says people like you with skills like yours have been successful in jobs like this. And so for those of us who are enrolled as a result of unemployment insurance, they will automatically be notified of any job that hits the system that they're eligible for service for right now. And then our other customers who may be going through vocational rehabilitation or for blind services, OET, that want to know about jobs as they come available can get those as well. The other thing is for our employer community, they can put their jobs in our system and they can know immediately when someone puts their resume on board and can get hired and get placed and get supports. So that's exciting. We just launched the second phase of the system, and we've working very hard now to promote that to the community. And unemployment insurance services is to try to do some more things online so that our customers don't have to come in for every transactional type of thing, and that they are fully aware of the services and supports that are available through the one-stop and not just the unemployment services that are available through the one-stops. And as I talked about Workforce Development Academy, what we really are looking for is a culture change. We want a customer-centric approach. We want to really strengthen the professional development and ongoing investment in our staff, and that's our means to do it long term. So with that, I think that I've covered most of the strategic plan, and David is going to probably fill in any gaps or
I think
make some relational points.
Yeah, one of the key things that I want to talk about is and the reason that I talked with Dr. Crystal about us getting together and talking about this is how it interrelates with our program and our profession. Commissioner Brimley talked about the initiatives that are out there in a global perspective in terms of the state. You know, we talk about in VR, we're about employment, we're about training, we're about individualizations. Well, those jobs, they have to come from somewhere. So, the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board is made up of various business and labor and governmental entities that are focused on developing opportunities for entry into the workforce. And economic development is about attracting jobs to Kentucky, and this gives us an avenue through this Workforce Investment Board initiative to get VR and people with disabilities plugged in at a business at various levels, as opposed to sending one person out to talk about, to one business about one job. We can get access on a broader level at an economic development level if we do it correctly, so that those conversations about people with disabilities can occur earlier. And the critical piece, the takeaway is to me, in terms of how this relates to our profession, is that we have to learn how to interact with it. In that Commissioner Brimley talked about the talent pipeline and the sector strategies. Help me, there were 5 state which were
health services,
okay,
energy creation and transmission, auto and aircraft manufacturing, business services and research development, and
Did you talk about logistics?
yes, transportation, distribution, and logistics. So those are the 5 state-level sectors, and they resonated with the Department of Education, with the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, with the Economic Development Cabinet, and so we're going to be investing in those sectors, creating industry partnerships, making sure that the career pathways that those employers in those sectors say they need and want for long-term growth are being supplied, and that we're aligning our education, economic development, and workforce development system to provide the tools and the quality workforce to meet their needs.
So essentially, it's to put it in terms that I can understand, because it has to be simple, because I don't understand complex things. But, we say, we're not just going to shotgun every business that wants to come in. We said Kentucky has strengths, that we're innately have strengths, and logistics is one, because that's the one that struck with me the most, because we're 1 day travel to what percentage?
Over 60%.
60% of the population of the United States. So that puts Kentucky at a certain advantage. So let's use that advantage and move, try to talk to these distribution centers, UPS, DHL, come in and expand, because we have this asset. Now, it's important to you all because, she talked about those 5 strategies. So we know that that's an emphasis in Kentucky. So then your responsibility is to educate yourself about what opportunities there are in those areas, and then let's start thinking about how we can provide access to people with disabilities to those jobs. What services do we need to provide those businesses when they come? We know logistics, okay? So we go and we learn about what goes on at logistics type centers, distribution centers. All right, so let's look at their business services they provide. Let's look at what the jobs look like. Well, how do we accommodate the various types of disabilities? Someone with a hearing impairment, somebody with a mobility impairment, somebody with the different physical restrictions that someone may have, someone that has a learning disability, someone with a visual impairment. We go in and we use those 5 statewide models. Of course, some of them are a little bit more broad than others. And we make sure that we have armed ourselves with the knowledge about those specific areas, so that when these businesses show up, then we can provide those services they need, or we can provide information, or we can provide good information to consumers when they say, listen, I want to go work at a distribution center like Best Buy or UPS. So we know about what kind of jobs are there, and we know what the expectations of the jobs are. We may know, and certain disabilities may not be good fits for different types of employers. Distribution centers, because it may not be a good idea for somebody with a physical disability because of the requirements of the job. So we can provide that information. So, by being aware where the state is in fact going, then you can arm yourself with that knowledge so that you can be a resource to the person when these jobs come up. And also being aware of things like the Kentucky career readiness certificate. Have you heard? Has anybody heard of that before? Anybody aware of that? Can you talk just a little bit more about what that is?
The National Career Readiness Certificate is based on 3 different elements. Reading for information, locating information, and I think there's a mathematical component. But 70% of the jobs that are out there today rely on those 3 key sectors of knowledge, being able to demonstrate your ability to apply knowledge in those and demonstrate skill in those particular areas. And so an individual can go in and take the test, and they can receive a status level. There's platinum is the highest level, there's gold, there's silver, there's bronze, and it demonstrates a certain level of sophistication. And then one of the components that we're also working on is job profiling, so that we can profile those critical jobs that employers tell us they need for the long term, and we can know what level certificate they might need in order to be successful. And it helps screen to make sure we're making good matches for employers. It also provides a level playing field for individuals with disabilities who say, yes, I do have the skills and I have the credential to back that up.
So these tests are being given in, are they?
They're
I know
through
they
a
started.
number of avenues, either through the Adult
the s-
Education
the
Center, through
schools, aren't the
KCTCS.
schools doing
Yep.
some school systems?
Our area technology centers are testing every single senior. It's part of the Department of Education's new college and career readiness standard. On the career readiness side, there are a couple of options, some paid for tests, some free tests, that you put the combination together and it indicates that an individual is graduating college ready or career ready. College ready is a cut score. It's, I think, like a 19 on your ACT. Career ready means you have either an industry certificate and some type of employability credential, and so, or you've taken the COSA and other tests, and so it's a combination of a couple of tests on two different avenues, one on the industry certificate side and one on kind of the soft skills side, and if you have that. And then local school districts who graduate seniors who are both college and career ready get a bump in their accountability score. They get another half-point bonus for everyone that is both college and career ready that they graduate. So this year we paid for all the testing for our area technology center students, and we put something in our budget to support all high school seniors, which we were unfortunately unsuccessful for getting funding for this year, but we'll continue to work over the next legislative sessions to try to put that in place.
So we're working with businesses then to say, when they start to look for applicants, they're going to say this requires a certain level on this, platinum level. So
Right.
our job then as VR professionals is to, since we know businesses are going to be doing that we learn this career readiness credential, we learn the test, that we assist, we focus on those specific skills, because we know then what the playing field is, because they say these are the skills, this is what that employer's looking for. So then we do some intensive study with that individual. There are tutor programs out there that can help the individual learn those skills. So we tap them into that resource to gain that skill, and then also assist with any accommodations the individual may need throughout the way. So that's a critical piece. And in terms of also arming yourself with knowledge, the other key piece as VR professionals is we have to act as advocates, and ensure access to people as we sort of broaden this approach. People with disabilities probably make up a much broader perspective or population than we probably even realize, because you have a lot of folks in the workforce or seeking employment that have disabilities that either have not disclosed or just have not been diagnosed yet. But a lot of times their needs aren't truly understood, and so we have to be advocates throughout the system to make sure that we need to think about accessibility. We need to think about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act, accommodations throughout these various tests, and that's our role, as well as to continue to be the advocates. Even sometimes they may not necessarily be our consumers, but we have to be the broader advocate for people with disabilities, because we may not be serving that group, but we have to make sure that we promote integration and promote accommodation and individualization of services for the persons with disabilities that need them, and make sure that we are advocating as professionals in these bigger groups, because the opportunity is now there, because we're working together. Economic development and VR are sitting together at the same table. So, let's talk about the American, the services then that we can provide as a profession and as an agency. and say, you know, what do businesses need in terms of knowledge about people with disabilities. Some may say, well, we need to know about opportunity tax credits. So that's something that, you know, we can partner with Office of Employment and Training and VOCREAB and give that information, or on-the-job training, or they may want to know more about the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we sort of identify what specialty that we have, what services we can provide, then we provide that then to these businesses as they're coming in, and we have to sort of develop those skills or those abilities based on the employer needs, and looking at that employer as a customer as well, but also knowing that that gives us an avenue that we never had before. Again, we sometimes, especially in Kentucky, seem to take the one person, one employer type approach. Well, this allows us to say, here's an avenue for multiple people with disabilities, and we can work with a larger company to say, listen, you know, here are the assets of the folks that we have. Here's the service we can provide as an agency and as an organization in terms of the one-stop career centers, and and sort of take that approach and create opportunities for people with disabilities. And this is, one of the reason that I wanted to have the commissioner speak is this is something unique in the country. There's really not many other states that have taken this approach, and it's cutting edge in many ways. And there's a lot of opportunities for our field to advance itself, because we have opportunities and ways to plug in that we never have before. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Does anybody have any questions? Big picture, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I noticed, I heard a lot about services for the client, but for services, you just barely touched on it at the end, services for the businesses and what's available to them in the way of supports and when they hire people with disabilities. Is there not some kind of webinar that can be put on the web page for businesses to make them aware of services that are available, so that, and who they can contact for those, for that information?
I think that's part of the business redesign team. Also, that's something that our agency just has been working on in general, but part of it is to get that feedback. You have to be careful if we assume that businesses want something. We may assume that they want more information about the Americans with Disabilities Act. They may not. So I think those are conversations that we need to have with those businesses and get that assessment and get that feedback from them.
I was going to say, for example, right now there are a lot of companies, national companies, who've made commitments to hire veterans, returning veterans, and a lot of returning veterans have a number of disabilities, and so making them aware of the resources we have to offer is exactly what needs to happen. And so when folks are saying to us, when employers are saying to us, we really want to make a commitment to hire 5% of our workforce of returning veterans, what are some of the things that you can do for us and offer some support? That would be one of the things that we'd come back with, is this is something that we have to offer, and this is how you can access it, and these are the tools available to you.
And there are some resources out there that those business services related to strictly to people with disabilities. Those resources are out there and fairly easy accessible, but many times the business, they need things more specific. They need things that are much more defined and cater to their specific need and to their specific job. They want a relationship with an agency that they can have ongoing conversations with about how it specifically applies to them. Those resources are out there. The Job Accommodation Network, the Southeast, or there's a lot of disability and technical assistance related to the ADA. Those things are out there, but a lot of times businesses would rather have someone to speak with where they can get more technical assistance on an intensive basis than just going to a website. Does that make sense? Okay. in the back there, and then,
This could be for either one of you, I guess. You was talking about the manufacturing or the certificates,
Uh-huh.
and right now you're giving them in trial programs.
Mm-hmm.
Is there gonna be a mandate sometime down the road where everybody has to take them, or as far as people with disabilities, or will they be, if they come into our office or your office,
I
is that
think
something they're gonna be had to take, or?
I think one of the things that we really want to make sure that we're being is demand driven. If the employer tells us that this is valuable to them and helping their recruitment, retention, and placement roles, and we have some really strong employers in like Owensboro and Lexington and others who feel very strongly that the National Career Readiness Certificate is a foundational element. And so when they put a posting with us, they make that what I would call a hard stop in their listing of their posting. And they say, you have to have it in order to. And I think the more that comes from the employer community, and it's not just us as agencies saying this is what we value, need, and want, then you're probably going to see that down the road. But I think that it's really based on the employers saying that it's valuable to them, that they can see an impact on their bottom line in recruitment and retention of workers. And so we're in that early process right now of building champions in the different sectors to go out and inform employers about how this can help them reduce their recruitment costs and their retention costs and so forth long term, and employee satisfaction rates. And we're having conversations with auto manufacturers in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're having conversations with other companies across the Commonwealth right now about the value. And we actually brought in a energy company executive out of Oregon who their company has done a complete turnaround based on National Career Readiness Certificate, and they did an educational program for all of our local Workforce Investment Board chairs, and we're doing a pilot project with the federal government to see whether or not that National Career Readiness Certificate means someone gets employed faster, and if so, then the federal government may include that in our performance measures, which will go a long way with creating demand as well, not only from the employer side, but the agency administrative side. So is that helpful?
and from the VR perspective, it would be individualized. It depends on the individual and whether or not that career readiness certificate would be an asset in the direction they want to go. If they want to start their own business, or if support employment, or there's various reasons that the counselor may make that decision. But the key thing is to make sure that we're aware of it and utilize it when it's in the benefit, and that's why that there has to be this knowledge that it's there, and realize that if Kentucky workforce is going this way, so VR needs to understand this and get with that program. But that's a great question.
Is there any effort regarding negotiations or working with the unions and the cities regarding wages? For example, say if someone wants to train a plumber, the person's got a disability, they can't be a full plumber, but they have to pay them full union wage. Or if they're
The prevailing wage
Right.
issues, yeah.
I'll let you tackle that. I don't know anything. I don't know much about unions yet.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily unions are just, I don't want to say sub-minimum, but a wage that's different,
Right,
understanding that the person has a disability and may not be doing the full
yeah.
capacity that his counterpart's doing, but at least he or she is working and learning something that they could possibly work up to.
Well,
But the employer is a small business and can't afford to pay somebody $30 an hour.
apprenticeship is a great model for that. Also, the federal wage and hour,
Union wage for apprenticeships?
though they have to pay certain levels for their wages, but I'm not sure that it's to the full scale of someone that's in there. But the issue is that wage and hour does provide for the opportunity for a training wage. and you can provide somebody a training wage, but there's some specific rules and regs. I'm not a real OSHA expert, so I wouldn't want to go into much detail except
Right.
to say that there are provisions in wage and hour that allows for accommodations for training wages and supports. In fact, some of the efforts that we're looking at in unemployment insurance with work share and some other things to allow somebody to have experiences so that they can continue to have a work history. You know, what you can see now playing itself out because so many folks are chronically unemployed for more than 6 months, more than a year, 2 years. Employers are now discriminating and saying, we won't, if you haven't been employed for 6 months, we won't even talk to you. So what we're trying to do are look at creating opportunities for individuals to have internships, to have a stipend work experience or other avenues so that they can continue to have a work history that is updated and fresh so that the employer community will even give them a second look. So I think things like what you're talking about are important policy discussions as well as considerations as we've been looking long-term for how do we adjust to the new economy that we're in with long-term unemployment.
There's also work opportunity tax credits that, and I'm not an expert in that, but you know, where they may have to pay them, you know, they may not be able to change the wage, but if they're the employer, they hire somebody with a disability, then they can apply the wages that they paid up to a certain amount and any accommodations they made, and then get tax
Yep.
credits.
That's
Yeah, they get
exactly
tax
right.
credits. So then on the back end, they're not taxed as much on that. They get a little bit more refund based on the money that they paid for that person with a disability to be employed.
And other targeted populations are youth, individuals who have juvenile records, others, some of them were unique to the Recovery Act, others have been ongoing for a while. But you know, you take a look at the youth unemployment rate, it's probably twice that of the general population. You take a look at unemployment rates for returning veterans, it's 2 to 3 times what the unemployment rate is for. So work opportunity tax credit is there for those reasons, for individuals with disabilities, youth, and others that are, you know, having a even tougher time. Take a look at older workers now. That's one of the most significant areas. Individuals that are 55 and older are really struggling because employers don't want to invest in them because of, you know, they're only going to be there working for their company for 5 or 10 years, or they don't want to pay the wage, right, the 20 years. But, you know, I think what you kind of hear through those various targeted populations are the soft bigotry of low expectations. Employers expect less, so they're not going to make the offer, and we have to overcome that. And I think things like the National Career Readiness Certificate are an opportunity to demonstrate the competencies so that it's you know, undeniable. You know, we're providing that level playing field.
Other questions? Yes.
This is probably a little out there, but if a person with a mental illness comes in, will they still receive the same opportunities and things that everyone else will receive? Just because I know people argue that when they take their medication, then it's not preventing them from like having a major life function. So if someone with paranoid schizophrenia or something comes in, but they're taking their medication, will they still receive those same opportunities, or?
Well, part of, and the commissioner can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part of the initial assessment of the individual and the case management to determine what do they need, what does the individual need in terms of services. Does in some cases, they may say, we're not sure, so let's contact Voc Rehab, give them a situation, or let's refer. Or, you know, however, they may do it as a team approach, they may refer the individual, but it's, you know, that communication. And then Voc Rehab says, well, you know, they're not eligible for our services because, you know, for various reasons, you know, depends on the confidentiality of what we can discuss. you know, and it's going to be individualized to each case. But you know, the key thing is that first person that receives that individual, that initial referral into the Career Center, you know, they have to identify the potential issues of this individual and identify, you know, is this person have visual impairment? Are they a veteran? What are all these things? And then navigate them towards the resources. Obviously, in some cases, it's better to send them to VR because we may be able to provide more comprehensive services, but that person may not need that. They may not need VR services because VR, we are not as expedient we're not meant to be as an expedient as a process as some of the other workforce functions. You know, so that may not be what they want, but that's why it's key to have that person there in the front end that helps. And then also the VR counselor, when they get them, say, okay, what do you want? Well, I just want to go get a job today. Well, that's not VR. You know, VR, we're looking at more long-term, and while we could provide some assistance, you know, some support, limited, you know, that's probably something that that person may be better served in another program. So, you know, the answer, it will depend on the individual circumstances. Right. I know that's sort of vague, but yep. That's the whole beauty of all the program, is that there is an assessment piece, there is a decision of let's decide where this person might be served best. And in some cases, it may be best that the person is with VR, or they may need to go somewhere else. Other questions? Be it known that we got done in an hour and a half. Don's
We got
just
30 more minutes. I do have just a quick one, I hope. In workforce and like dealing with veterans and just anybody in particular, there's a group of people out there that convicted felons.
Yeah.
You got a lot of veterans that come back, they have polytrauma, they have this, they have that, they get into alcohol and pills, they end up getting arrested, they spend a year or more in a jail or prison. Non-violent offenders.
Yeah.
Potentially have good skills.
Yeah.
They've addressed their alcohol and drug issues. They've served their time. They're good people again.
Yeah.
However, because of that felony conviction, they're having a hell of a time getting to work.
Yeah.
Whether they're veterans or not. I know some convicted felons who have totally turned their lives around and would be excellent employees for anybody, but
Sure.
employers don't look at them.
Sure.
Is there any kind of talk or discussion or things that they could do over a period of time to quote unquote prove themselves again to any of these industries coming to Kentucky that could employ?
Well, there are a couple of things that we have going on. One of the things that we've really been trying to do is move our veterans services staff to where veterans are. For example, we are doing some provision of workforce employment services and supports while individuals may still be incarcerated, or through the VA hospital, or through their National Guard posts, as opposed to expecting them to come into the center. We have been exploring whether or not we want to buy some federal bonding, which would then provide a bond assurity to an employer that says if you'll hire this person, there's theft or embezzlement or other activities, that this bond would cover whatever losses that employer might experience. And we've been researching whether or not whether that would be of value to the employer community, and if so, that we'd make that available. There are a whole host of things, but there are also, we have to help veterans who do have criminal histories realize they're never going to be, you could go and get training, but you won't be hired as a teller or a security guard, we have to help you find a realistic vocational goal, because some of those things will just never be made available just by industry standards. And so,
Too.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we talked about in the development of the draft strategic plan for OVR, is that there are some unique issues out there that all of workforce is dealing with. So let's problem solve that and train, and try to, people with criminal backgrounds. The war on drugs has now left us with a lot of folks that have criminal backgrounds. And, if that's one thing that's exploded over my time in this field, is we have many more people now with disabilities plus criminal backgrounds. Well, that's also an issue in the WIA programs and OET and all these, the vet programs. So, that's an opportunity for us to get together as partners, and then, let's come up with strategies and then, hit that again now that we've partnered with economic development, have that be part of when we bring employers in.
And there are some employers who specifically are willing to take individuals that have criminal backgrounds and be that proving ground so that they can get some work history and then be much more marketable to the next employer or to the next employer.
Just from the criminal justice perspective, it's a reduction of recidivism, having them falling back into a life of crime because they can't get legitimate work because they're work
Right.
addicted. So, I mean, it's just a kind of a thing, if you can find a workable issue
Break that
and
cycle.
give them the opportunity to prove themselves. Because I know not all of them are ever going to make it back
Yeah,
all the way. But there are guys out there and girls
yeah.
that could completely come back within society's norms and operate and work and be good employees, We need to give them a chance.
I guess my question goes along with what he was talking about. Is there a way to contact your office or VR and find out, because you made a statement that there's certain companies that are willing to hire convicted felons, is there a way to find out, which companies these are? Okay.
Our case managers know that probably more readily through the individual comprehensive one-stop, so I'd say that we probably would want to connect you to a local one-stop manager, office manager, or a business services staff that would know that specifically for that particular area of the state or so forth, but that's how we'd probably do it.
Yeah, and that's always, but you always have to be sensitive to that issue,
Yeah.
because at one time we tried to put together a list of companies that would do that. Then we found out that's a big no-no, because that kind of a lot of companies don't want to be known,
publicize.
don't want that publicized, because then they're inundated with those. They want to be a little bit
Good
more
point.
selective and work more on an individualized case basis. So, but that information, you can acquire it, but it's not necessarily published. Other questions?
Yes. Dr. Crystal.
You have a question, or are you just waving?
No, I got a question.
Okay.
I can, so everybody can hear this. Is this microphone?
You can come walk between us again so you can pick up on the mic.
You don't hear me back there? You can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, and I've listened to what you said, and that's great. I appreciate you talking about this, and, it's really been informative. And it sounds like there's a good relationship between our primary constituent area and stakeholders, the OVR and OFB. But there seem to be other areas as well that are part of the cabinet. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So can you talk about areas in which graduates of this program could apply for or fit into jobs that exist or are potentially available, that they could do with the skill set that they bring as rehabilitation counselors beyond OFB, beyond OVR? I don't mean to put you on the spot on
No,
this,
that's
but just
a
a general.
local
what
school
would you
districts
like-
are a great place because a number of school districts now are really focused on transition rates of their young people who are moving through the system, and they need support and that kind of ongoing planning and guidance and support. So that would be one area that I would suggest in local school districts or in every county in the state of Kentucky, and some have multiple school districts. So that's one avenue. Another, probably not as much of an opportunity, but KET does a lot of distance education and distance learning projects, and so taking a look in professional development, and they're doing, for example, the GED program. So taking a look at how we make sure that the programming that's being offered is sensitive to individuals with disabilities, and that, for example, we're doing the Workforce Development Academy, and we're doing manager training, and we're going to make sure that we have the captioning and that we have all the different means to be able to make sure that those online resources are available in formats that individuals with disabilities can access, whether they're managers or whether they're customers or whether they're also libraries have special support opportunities for their consumers. That would be probably more part-time basis opportunities that would be available.
But when you also think with some of the WIA programs,
Yep.
some of the case management,
Yep.
maybe even some of the business services.
I wouldn't be surprised, especially with a lot of our efforts, a lot of conversations David and I have been having, is whether or not we want to, we haven't piloted in Kentucky disability navigators and one-stops, but local workforce investment areas may be wanting to make some investments in that. And so being a disability navigator and a comprehensive one-stop might be a great opportunity.
And can you explain that? You probably explain it better than I can, what that is,
sure.
or do you want me to?
No,
And
that's
then-
fine.
Okay.
A disability navigator is pretty much what it sounds like. It's working with individuals with disabilities to navigate all the services that are available through their comprehensive one-stop, and making sure that there's sensitivity training for the staff, the frontline staff that are in the centers, as well as problem solving and troubleshooting as issues arise, so that we can, and if there are accessibility issues within facilities that they need to be accommodated, and those types of things. So we're looking for a pot of money maybe at this point to be able to support that, but we also have case managers within the Workforce Investment Act and through the Wagner-Pizer program that provides services that we could certainly utilize individuals with your skill sets to provide those supports to individuals who come through those various programs as well. Trying to think of some of the other agencies that are in the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. We have Libraries and Archives and KET, and
That probably knocked them all out, yeah, I think so. I don't think
Department of
environmental
Ed.
education and,
yeah.
I can't imagine any other ones.
Yeah.
But in terms, probably that would hit the big ones we talked about is the case management. In fact, we've actually hired, our agency has hired staff that work for the various WIBs, the Workforce Investment Board, the local boards, the Workforce Investment Act. I mean, so, there's been several individuals hired that work inside the one-stop concept or career centers. So that, obviously then that would translate the other way too, that those are skills that they have, that you would have that would be applicable there. In fact, we've had a graduate or two that have worked in the one-stops in the area development districts to go and focus on workforce. Because some of the things that you pick up in rehabilitation counseling are utilized in all through workforce. The assessment piece, the case management piece, the career counseling piece, the placement piece, the planning piece. Those are all things that are utilized system-wide. You learn that, but you also learn how that specifically relates to persons with disabilities. But when you really get into a lot of the very difficult cases, even in unemployment or employment services, they have a lot of issues, a lot of functional issues that they have to deal with, that those folks have to help them address. So that's something that you learn in this program, is assessing the individual strengths, assets, determining what the best process is, following through with that process, assisting them, in that outcome, and then sort of determine, when they've sort of met their services. So that concept is from what I've seen, several places in the one-stop or the other workforce partner processes, though that's there. That basic process. You just learn a lot more about doing that, working with people with disabilities, plus a little bit more of the counseling than many of the other professions utilize, which is only an asset.
I'm thinking too, we talked about Accelerating Opportunity Kentucky, and part of the wraparound services for individuals who go through that program are what we call career coaches and support service folks. The support service, the success coaches are individuals who are focusing on making sure that they're adapting to the community college environment and life and are able to adapt. And then we have career coaches who are helping them think long-term how they move down their pathway and be supportive of that. And that's a growing area. I mean, we're going to see a lot more of that because the community college system has realized that their traditional student isn't traditional anymore. And so we have a lot of folks who are coming back into the education system or have been in social service agencies, and they've reached their limits on welfare benefits or other things and are looking to get back into the environment. And so they need those wraparound services in order to be successful to complete their education goals and support, get to their career goal. Any other questions?
Sure, I have more questions along these lines.
Okay.
Do you like answering these questions?
Sure.
I prepared her for this, just so you know, for your questions.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm really not trying to put you on the spot. I'm trying to help
Sure.
students to be able to prepare for
Yes.
the job market. Now, one of the things I remember, when I came here for professionals, the job market was really worse than it then, when I came here 30 years ago, than it is today. I mean, when I came here, I remember going to a conference, a state rehabilitation agency conference, first semester I was here, and they asked me to talk about something, but they were in the midst of a RIF, reduction in force, and that was, they were laying people off.
Yep.
This is John Y. Brown era, and they were laying folks off. I don't think we're at that point professionally here. I think the recession is worse in other areas, for, like you mentioned, mineral extraction, people are getting laid off, there's, mines close, and when they come back, it becomes more mechanized, so you have less people. We had a speaker in the other night, talked about that they're unable to find good workers because of the drug problems, drug screening. So I guess my next question, and I'm not gonna ask a whole lot of questions, but my next question would be, do you have advice for students in terms of how to best be prepared to compete for the jobs that are out there? To be able to talk about the skills that they have, like Dr. Beach did, who did a fine job because they've obviously been out there a while. But how do you get someone who's just finishing a degree, to talk about the skills they have, be able to articulate what they can do, and not talk themselves out of a job? I mean, I think a lot of times people will make we talk about this in job placement, that a lot of times the person applying for a job will talk the employer out of hiring that person because of, saying they can't do things, or they not able to do it, or they don't know, or they come late, for job interviews or whatever. Do you have advice on how a newly minted graduate, I guess just in preparing, because a lot of these folks are going into field work, what they can do in their field work settings, whatever that setting is, to take advantage of that opportunity, to develop a good reputation, and then when they finish the program, go out and market themselves, just as they would be expected to do with the clients, the consumers they work with. Any thoughts along those lines?
I
And I know
think-
this is a little different than what you presented.
That's okay.
But, you know, you
That's
see,
totally okay.
you work, you know, you've got the big picture up there.
Yeah.
But you see professionals and you see issues and you
Sure.
see, you know, what makes somebody a professional, effective, anything you can share along those lines.
I think one of the
And
most.
Dr. Beach also, you can, want to address that too.
I think one of the most important things that you can do is take advantage of your networks and to join associations and to participate in and to offer training opportunities. There are SHRMs with their Societies of Human Resource Managers. There are local chambers. There are Kiwanis, Rotaries, and others, organizations that have business folks. And if you can go and present on some of the most innovative trends, a lot of what you have developed experience in is in human resources management, that can then use that opportunity to market yourself in a way where you present yourself as a professional, building on the experiences that Dr. Beach talked about, and it's in those networks. Another opportunity is through our local workforce investment boards. One of our big trends lately has been job clubs, where you get in with a group of folks who are looking to be employed, and they help each other. And what's been great is where we see the clubs close because everybody got a job out of that club because someone knew 6 degrees of separation. You know, they knew somebody who was associated with somebody who got hired through. I think the other thing is to really take advantage of your field experience and see that as an opportunity to put your best foot forward with an employer, being willing to go over and above, you know, being willing to say not say that's not my job, to take on the extra assignment, to show your range of skills. One of the things that we've been doing in this economy was we made some money available to the local workforce investment boards for those folks who are enrolled in training to have an internship experience to complement because a lot of the competition that you have right now are folks who have 5, 10, 20 years of experience, and so you're fighting a tide of a gluttony of folks with some experience. But what you bring are the latest technologies, the latest research, the latest approaches, national trends, and marketing, how you can bring a fresh perspective to a company with resources and supports is a big avenue or an opportunity. Those are a couple of mine. David, I know you've got some ideas as well.
Well, I was thinking I was going the other direction, and also I think Dr. Crystal sort of mentioned it. Understand that your reputation and especially your professional reputation, understand how important that can be. And we live in a world where one mistake can go viral. You know, our managers, if you come apply, they'll Google. They'll see what happens when your name comes up. So beware of you know, monitor what you put out regarding your, you know, your opinions, your activities, what pictures show up on Facebook. You know, those are the types of things, because those are things that people look at now. You know, that's just the society in which we live in, and understand that your professional, you know, you represent yourself, but you also, when you're going to be hired, you're going to effectively be representing an entity as a business. And if you work with people with disabilities, you also represent them. So if you know, you don't respect the profession, don't respect yourself, don't respect the people that you work with, and you put things on a Twitter or a Facebook post that, you know, I can't believe I work with these type of people, or put people down that you work with, that's harming all, you know, yourself, the profession, and people with disabilities, and it's going to make you very difficult to hire. So you have to be aware of how you sort of put yourself out there in terms of who you are, and understand that right now we live in an unprecedented time where people can access more information about you than ever before, and be aware of that. And so if you Google your name and there's your a picture of something that happened spring break 1998, then you better be prepared to explain that. And you know that that's out there. Now everybody's going to go Google themselves and see what happens. But understand that that's very important, and your reputation is something that's very difficult to develop, but it's even more difficult to repair.
Yeah.
And if you're right now starting as a new professional, don't do anything that can damage that. And certainly if you've already done some things that have damaged it, well, be ready to explain it, and don't make it any worse. Stop digging that hole. Behave like a professional, know how a professional should behave.
Yeah, a lot of employers say, we'll teach somebody the skills that they need, but we need people with soft skills. People are going to show up on time, they're going to be respectful, they're going to do the work, they're going to have a full day, they aren't on their cell phone all the time, they're not texting, and I can't tell you the number of people that we have walking in the unemployment line now, and they lost their job because they wouldn't turn their cell phone off when there was a no cell phone policy, or their boss did a printout of their internet searches on their computer because they were walking by their office and saw something up that was not germane to the work that they were doing, or that they failed a random drug test at their place of employment. And those soft skills, and that's one of the components of the work-ready communities, those soft skills are just as important, if not more important. Sometimes now we find ourselves and we're at dinner with each other, and we're the same people sitting at the table and we're texting. We've got to learn how to have conversation and be able to, have dinner etiquette and lunch etiquette, and how to have appropriate work conversations related to, and those types of things set yourself apart from your colleagues in your field studies that you do, any internships or opportunities that you have, and really being willing to know the company, know where the company is going, and where your skill sets can be an asset to them meeting their goals. Because that's what they're hiring somebody for, is someone who's going to help them meet their goals, not necessarily to meet your personal goals. They may ask you that you want 5 and 10 years down the road, but they want to hear that because they want to know whether or not you're going to be there long enough, whether there's going to be loyalty to the company, whether you are someone who is committed to long-term, lifelong education and training, that after you've gotten this degree, that's not the end, that you're willing to invest in yourself to keep your skill set sharp and tooled, and you have a long-term view. I know that it's a lot different, when you take a look at education and goals through the generations. Most young people anymore know within 6 weeks whether or not they want to stay at a company. And a company knows within 6 weeks whether or not they want to keep that individual. And so, you from the get-go, everything that you do is pertinent. So.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your insights. Are there other questions? Any other comments? Anything anybody would like to ask? I appreciate both of you coming in. I don't think we've had a real commissioner speak to us before.
Well, it's absolutely a pleasure to be
Now,
here.
you rank up with I had one other person in this room who was famous. I put you in the famous category.
Oh my gosh, I've never thought of myself as famous.
From the professionals.
Uh-huh.
The other person I had was from the athletic point of view. I once had Sam Bowie come in
Oh.
and speak.
That means nothing to them. They don't have any
You know who Sam
idea.
Bowie is?
I
Sure
do.
you do. Sam Bowie was drafted.
He's an old guy that played basketball.
Sam Bowie was drafted ahead of Michael Jordan.
That's right, yeah.
Drafted.
The one class I skipped.
Were you in that class?
No, I skipped that one class and you brought Sam Bowie in.
There you go.
Yeah.
See,
I taught
you
me
don't
I
let
didn't
us-
skip anymore. Yeah.
How did I know Sam Bowie? No one asked that. I didn't know Sam Bowie, but one of the students who was taking a class, that class, her last name was Bowie, and I asked, are you related to Sam Bowie? She said, yes, he's my brother. So I said, can you get him to come in to talk?
Yeah.
So I got him to come in
6
to talk.
degrees of separation.
And it was this class.
It was right in this room, just sitting
Yeah.
right where Bill Riggs is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
So-
for the opportunity.
So
It's
thank
been a
you, I
pleasure.
appreciate it. And we off now, next class, next Tuesday. If anyone has anything they'd like to talk to me about, some of you, Brad, Kimberly, who else needs to talk? Anyone else, anyone?